XFL South title game, Saturday night in the Rig. Great news coming from the XFL League office today. We got the upgrade from ESPN2 to ESPN, which not only means the worldwide leader believes in the XFL, it means, no pun intended, by the way, it means they believe in the XFL enough to make the NFL draft the official lead-in to the XFL playoffs. So when you're watching round 7, we're going straight from Mr. Irrelevant into Wade Phillips coaching against Bob Stoops. And speaking of Wade Phillips, he might know a thing or two about the NFL draft. Remember, he took guys like Des Bryant, Sean Lee, who were stars for the Cowboys well after he left there. And think about Bob Stoops on the other sideline. 13 first-round draft picks of his own during his tenure at Oklahoma. Remember Adrian Peterson, Gerald McCoy, Lane Johnson, a guy Zook knows well. So this is going to be a great coaching matchup. If you're looking for an excuse to watch more football, we have a treat for you. Wade Phillips against Bob Stoops. Zook, let's take a look at the last 2 meetings for these teams. Back in week 2, the Roughnecks 23-14 win over the Renegades. I added the over late in this one. Zook jumped on with me. We didn't have an official best bet, but we did have a late play. I don't know if it lived up to that game of the week expectations back in week 2 that we had. Only 37 combined points here. Houston kind of convinced everybody they were going to win it all after week 1, and I think everybody has taken a different stand at this point. Arlington had gutted out that second half comeback against Vegas in week 1. Then they got together week 2. The Houston defense was in the backfield all night. They sacked Drew Plitt. Yeah, remember Drew Plitt? He won't be a part of this matchup, but they sacked him 5 times. Houston had their special teams miscues that set Arlington up for those points that they got. Renegades that night managed just 125 yards of total offense in the loss. So on to week 9, different story. Actually, it was week 10. The matchup had potential playoff implications for that reason. However, San Antonio lost to DC, putting Arlington in the playoffs without having to win. So we can't hold too much stock in this game. Luis Perez did play the whole game, but I think Arlington was very conservative. They were settling for field goals, which has been an issue for them all season. They cannot have that in this one. Cole McDonald played the entire game at quarterback for Houston. Had a little bit of Caleb Ellaby in there, but you won't see him on Saturday night. Davion Smith was out in this game, so even though most of the defensive players on both sides started throughout the game in this one, I think you're going to get 2 way different teams than you saw in this matchup last week. So, Zook, looking back at your best bet history so far, 3-0 betting the Houston Roughnecks. I think personally you've picked your spots pretty well when it comes to Houston because they are 6-4 against the spread. So you've got them when they're beating the number. You have yet to back Bob Stoops, though. So I think I know kind of the way you're going in this matchup. Go ahead and sell us the Houston Roughnecks, not only winning this one for the XFL South title, but covering that 6.5 that we see on our graphic.
Yeah, well, it comes down to defense for sure. Couple things that you didn't mention about the previous games. Arlington only scored 23 points combined in both those games. Houston has put up 24 or 23 and 25.
Yeah.
So they're
Some
not
of those
scoring
on defense too.
And I know this week 10 game didn't mean a lot. However, the stats don't lie. You know what I mean? So we're going to look at this Houston defense a little bit closer. I mean, they led the league in sacks, 35. They have 4 scoop and scores, which is clearly first place in the league.
Big game.
Second in picks with 12 and tackle for loss with 58. I mean, that is crazy. That's they're putting fear into quarterbacks.
That's Seth Phillips 3-4, baby.
Right? Exactly. Speaking of quarterbacks, this is the main thing for me. They have turned the ball over 11 times, which is second in the league. Only DiNucci.
Yeah, I knew you were going to come in with that.
Only DiNucci takes care of that, takes the first prize in there. So, like, to me, it comes down to Houston's defense. Are they going to be able to hold the Arlington offense to the same amount of points they are.
Right.
If you go back to the Week 10 game, I forgot to say this, Week 10 game, Arlington did put up 245 yards.
Yeah, they got better.
But they scored less points.
They just settled for field goals.
They scored 5 less points.
Yeah.
So that's concerning. And then the defense also has to take care of the offensive mistakes, which I think they can. This is pretty much a no-brain pick for me. You already know what side I'm on. So,
are you concerned Brandon Silvers could lose it for you?
No, because something I also didn't mention is Houston doesn't get a lot of credit for their run game, but they are third in the league, I believe, with 900 some yards.
Yeah.
I think that they will pound the ball a little bit more.
Good running backs.
Same thing. 13. They have 13 rushing TDs.
Yeah, between Borghi, Alleen, you had Jeremy Cox showing out last week. They do have a deep running back room.
So what does that tell you? 13 TDs in 10 games. When they get in the red zone, they are scoring.
Yeah.
So
they like to throw Cole in down there, run a little RPO. They're pretty good on their conversions because they have that package. Yeah, I mean, we're going to assume Brandon Silvers gets the start here, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Has to.
So
but
I mean,
Cole McDonald will play. I think.
Oh yeah, he will. He'll have his packages like normal. I think when it comes down to it, Houston checks all the boxes for me. I'm not scared of the 6.5. So I mean,
are we less confident on Houston than we were after the first half of the season?
No, because we kind of dogged them for the last few weeks. 4 or 5 weeks that their offense hasn't been there. They still average 24.7 points per game.
Right.
And they've only not gotten to 20 against Seattle, St. Louis, San Antonio.
Right.
So the offense is there. I think the problem is in the beginning, everybody hyped them up that they're going to be the best offense in the league, and they were.
Oh, yeah.
And then all of a sudden, they went down.
They were number one in our power poll for a solid 2 weeks before I threw DC above them. And then week 6, they just started to spiral offensively, but that defense has kept them in games. Let me play devil's advocate here, though, for Zook, as we're going to do for both games. On the Bob Stoops side of things, first off, 6.5, way too high for a playoff game in this league. It makes me wonder, are the sportsbooks expecting some chaos with that Houston defense creating havoc, creating turnovers that then lead to scores? Zook just told you, 4 scooping scores this year, and they all came in the last couple weeks. So, don't sleep on Arlington's ability to create turnovers either now. Zook said Houston is second in the league in picks. Who do you think first is? Arlington with 13. He also said Houston with the forced fumbles. Arlington with 9 of their own. 22 takeaways for this defense. And they've also housed 2 pick sixes and a fumble back to pay dirt. So Brandon Silvers, who is interception prone, we know that, cost us some money this year. Better be careful in this matchup. We know these defenses are stout, and you're going to get great games from each side. That's why the total is 41.5, pretty low for a playoff game, compared to DC Seattle at 48.5 in the pouring rain, right? It doesn't matter. Houston, Arlington expected to play in the low 40s, high 30s. I want to talk a bit about the potential of the Arlington offense for a second. So go ahead, roll that first graphic for me here, Zook. This is the team that for the first half of the season, I refer to as the Arlington Renegades, and boy, were they. Asking them for points in the first half of the season was like Rod Woodson asking Dean Blandino to overturn a call. It just was not happening, guys, for the Renegades. Look at this. They scored. This is actually the first 7 games you could take. They scored 8 offensive touchdowns in 7 games. They could barely manage 11.5 points per game, 167 average pass yards per game. So they weren't even near 200. And look at the touchdown to interception. This is passing. 4 touchdowns passing versus 9 picks for Drew Plitt and Kyle Sloter, which those 2 names, it seems like forever ago that they even were on this roster. So during this 5-game stretch, or actually the first 5 games of the season we'll take, they were a 1-4 team against the spread. But they did enough to keep their head above water and keep swimming and keep themselves in the playoff race. They were easily last in the league in both passing and rushing at this point. But Bob Stoops stuck with his guy, Jonathan Hayes, when other OCs in the league were on the way out. You remember Dwayne Taylor got the out in Vegas, relieved of his duties. Jamie Elizondo, relieved of his duties in San Antonio. Stoops stuck with his guy, Jonathan Hayes, and along came Luis Perez. Hit that next one for me, Zook. So let's look at the comparison. In Luis's 3 games starting, you might not see much of a difference, right? Outside of pass yards per game. Almost 80 more than they were doing in the first 7 games. But they have improved their points per game by almost a touchdown. I know 11.5 to 16 doesn't seem like much, but remember, what's the point spread here? 6.5. So if I'm getting a team that is 5.5 points per game better with this quarterback you see on your screen who we're about to talk to coming up in spring ball series, I'll take the 6.5 with Arlington. They're throwing less picks. Obviously, the 1 passing touchdown isn't great, but only 2 picks in 3 games for Perez. The pick 6 in the DC game is clearly the one that upset Bob Stoops. You heard him on the live mic scolding Brandon Arconato, the wide receiver, and telling Perez live on the air, that's not on you. So we can almost take one of those interceptions away. Guys, it's not crazy to say the Arlington Renegades were better than the DC Defenders that day that they played. And DC did enough to squeak out a win. They came storming back in the 4th quarter. The defense made stops. They created turnovers like they have all season against a team who takes care of the ball well in DC. So here's my point with all this. There's 2 ways that this can go on Saturday night. If Arlington executes offensively and plays their best ball, which they have against the DC Defenders, I think they have a similar outcome to that game. Arlington's ceiling is to play Houston within a field goal, 1 or 2. Even at their best, I don't know if this team is talented enough to have it all ride on Luis Perez. I think their ceiling is to come down to the end of the game with a chance to win it on the final possession, and we'll see what happens because crazy things happen in this league, right? The other way this could go is Arlington could be burnt toast by the 4th quarter if things get out of hand for them, like they have in the last 2 matchups. So Luis Perez, we know he's going to take his fair share of hits. That Houston defense is coming. They're without Tim Ward, but they will have Trent Harris, Emmanuel Ellerby, and some of those defensive studs that Zook went on to highlight. You find Sal Cannella in the pass game. You mix in a good dose of the run. Get back to that offensive balance, right, that you wanted coming into the season. They can be in this game with a chance to win at the end. And Zook, I'm taking Houston outright. I don't think no matter what Arlington does, they can win this game. I don't want a 4-6 team in the XFL championship game, right? So I'm taking Houston, but I'm taking the points. 6.5, Arlington, far too many. I don't know. I hate messing with official scores, but this is a 22-21 for me type of deal here. I think that Arlington will cover the spread.
Yeah, I don't see it. I'm taking Houston straight up. You'll see later. I'm also taking...
Yeah, I guess not to ruin our best bets, but you see the way we're going with these games. And of course, Arlington getting a 3rd shot at Houston, the same way Seattle getting a 3rd shot at DC. So you see both of these games and how they set up. I just feel like a touchdown or more, if that's going to happen, you better get a defensive touchdown, Zook. Because I don't know if Houston's offense is capable of putting this game away.
I think they are. I think one thing that you're lacking in your argument is that Houston's defense is better than DC's. So,
yeah, see, you're right. The pass defense has been better. I think the schemes are comparable with what Houston likes to do to rush the passer. We know Perez is going to get hit.
Well,
right?
And the other thing is Arlington is not running the ball any more effectively with or without Perez.
Yeah.
They are passing the ball better, but you would think that the pass would open up the run, and it hasn't.
Yeah, I think Arlington, their identity, they wanted to be this balanced offense where A.J. Smith wanted to throw it 60 times a game.
Sure.
Arlington has not executed that balanced attack. They're now leaning on the pass. When they played against DC, 335 passing yards for Perez. They did not run the ball well.